Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily for January 7th, 2025. Coming up, the Wolves got their groove back against the Clippers. Sam Cooper from the Timeline podcast is here to talk about the Suns and their bad vibes. And the Pistons are 500, so we're going to have a party. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, S.
Morning.
Another busy Monday night in
Always
the NBA.
is.
The Suns, the trade rumors, they got lineup changes. So we got Sam Cooper to talk about that after the break. But let's start with the game of the night. We had the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Los Angeles Clippers in Minnesota. Kawhi Leonard, game 2. But right before the game, as we found out there was going to be a lineup change and not the magic bullet lineup change we all thought with Julius Randle maybe going to the bench. Instead, it's Mike Conley going to the bench, Dante DiVincenzo moving into the starting lineup. I got to ask you, was it the magic bullet for them?
Yes and no. They didn't start out the game as good as you'd think they would. The Clippers just absolutely dominated them, especially in Kawhi's minutes early in the first half. But that being said, I think it was the right decision to bench Conley and bring Dante DiVincenzo in. One, it gives them another ball handler, and I know Conley is supposed to be that, but he just hasn't been the same this season. Father time, undefeated when it comes to Mike Conley. But Dante is a three-point shooter, can stretch the floor, a guy who can viably knock down shots next to Edwards, and a guy who can put the ball down, make some plays for you. So I think it works. They're a positive in their minutes together too as a backcourt. When they made that Karl Anthony Towns trade, it was with the idea that Dante would eventually start. So I don't hate the move at all. We'll see if the Randle shoe drops as well, though. Maybe that's the next thing that happens.
So the Wolves did get the win 108-106, and there was exactly one reason. Anthony Edwards puts up 37 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. I mean, he's been more of a playmaker this year anyway, but especially without Conley out there. I mean, he has to have the ball in his hands. Now, early on, I didn't love how the spacing looked. Obviously with Gobert and Randle, you're going to have trouble out there. And I mean, Anthony Edwards has already talked about how hard it's been with all the double teams, not being able to dunk. And in this game, he kind of did everything. He hit 6 threes. He had a great dunk, which should have been an and one. He got teed up for it. But this was like a little bit more of what we wanted to see from Ant. And, I think when he has the ball in his hands and he gets to dictate what's happening, he just looks better.
Yeah, I think it's really important to contextualize the spacing around Ant. Like you mentioned it with Gobert and Randle, but it's not the ideal spot or the ideal type of offense that a guy that is that great of an athlete should be working in, right? I remember a couple of years ago, people started to compare him to Jason Tatum in terms of his evolution as a playmaker. And Tatum is like well beyond that now. He's an elite playmaker in this league. But you can see contextually what kind of guys Ant needs around him. It's great floor spacing. It's guys who can put the ball down and make decisions. And I'm not sure this Timberwolves team right now, currently constructed, is the way to do that. So he's just trying to shoot them into games, which is, I think, part of the equation here. It kind of reminds me of like those middling Kobe Lakers years with the Smush Parkers and Chris Mims of the world. Although the Timberwolves are much more talented than that.
Yeah, please tell me. I mean, we would all love to know who you're calling Smush.
I'm not calling Smush. I'm not calling anybody Smush here. Maybe no, I'm not going to call him Smush. Okay, but either way, I think in the sense that like, his pull-up shooting has been incredible this year. His scoring has been incredible this year. His evolution as a shooter, just because the team requires him to be that guy for them. I think it shows you just like the incredible talent that Ant is, and the playmaking will eventually catch up.
And I think DiVincenzo does make sense because of the 3-point volume, and it should take some of that load off of Anthony Edwards, but I still think you have to look at the Randle piece of this and Randle in this game. Again, the ball is in Ant's hands more. Randle, 5 points, 2 assists. It's he has a hard time being able to fit in when the ball, isn't able to be in his hands, allow him to facilitate more. And you can't do my turn, your turn, my turn when it's Anthony Edwards sharing with Julius Randle. That's
why Naz Reid makes a lot more sense, man. The 3-point shooting. the creation off the bounce. He's a lot faster with his decisions than Randall is. I mean,
activity on defense. We could go on and on and on. But let's talk about the Clippers side of this. I mean, look, they're on the road, but game 2 for Kawhi, I think the biggest deal for the Clippers is that he was able to play in this game after just playing Saturday. That's great. Physically, he looked really good. I thought he looked strong. He looks really lean compared to kind of being a little heavier last year. The one thing that's missing, I think, is rhythm. He just clearly looks like a guy that hasn't played much. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's understandable given how long he's been out. And I think for what it's worth, he's made their defense look a lot better too. They're already a great defensive team, but you throw him in next to Chris Dunn, next to a guy like Derrick Jones Jr., add in a Nick Batum. These guys are guys who can really guard on the perimeter. And it just makes them a lot more fun on the defensive end. This is already a really entertaining defense to watch night in, night out. You add a guy like Kawhi, who, like you said, is leaner. He's moving a lot better. That part is what's really intriguing to me. The offense will come. I'm very, very confident in the fact that Kawhi will.
You're adding Kawhi Leonard to this defense, by the way. I mean, exactly. The Clippers are good. A little bit of news from Dallas. Kyrie Irving has a bulging disc in his back, and he's going to miss 1 to 2 weeks. Jeff Stotts in Street Clothes, if you're on X or Blue Sky, he's an injury analyst. He said the average amount of time missed for this sort of injury is about 28 days. Wow. I think with a back, you're going to take your time. But when you're the Mavericks and you've got these title hopes, now your 2 best players are going to be out because Luka's still out with, that leg injury. Things are going to get weird. And they got weird last night, The starting lineup for the Mavericks against the Memphis Grizzlies, who are, they've been doing pretty well this season.
Overall,
it was weird. Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Maxi Kleber, and Derek Lively II. No point guard, not really much ball handling out there. Yeah, it was not great. Look, Memphis picks up the win. Mavericks down bad. How did Memphis do it? I mean, because they have talent?
Oh, no, it's because of Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah, he was crazy.
Look, Jaren is putting up an all-NBA year. I think he's on his way to being an all-star, especially with Ja being hurt. 35 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists. He's the first Grizzlies big man to do the 30, 10, and 5 since Jonas Valanciunas in 2019, which is crazy to think about. But Jaren is just the guy who kind of keeps this ship going when all of these injuries are really hurting the Grizzlies. I kind of want to see what the Mavericks end up doing in this situation, though, because no Luka, no Kyrie for probably this next month. How are you going to survive in the Western Conference?
Do they start thinking about a panic trade? There's a guy out there that you could maybe plug in, and he's a ball handler, and he plays on the wing. I look. That would be a desperation trade to do it right now. I mean, I think that if this team is healthy, they're going to be fine. I think making the playoffs. Yeah, as long as they're healthy, come April, I think that they're going to be able to make some noise.
They look like contenders to start this year too.
They really do.
Just,
when they've been healthy, and before we go to break, I got to ask you, because this is becoming like a nightly occurrence. What did Wemby do last night? He does something. He breaks a record or something every night.
Yeah, it was a quiet night, a pretty quiet night for Victor Wembanyama. Yeah. 23 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, just 8 blocks.
So quiet, run-of-the-mill pedestrian night.
Nothing
8 blocks.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel about 8 blocks? Yeah.
I mean, 8 blocks is pretty impressive, but even more impressive, the Bulls, who are too good to tank, they're going to have to tear down the Bulls. They came back from 19 down to win this game. Zach LaVine with another ridiculous game. I can't figure out, they can't give away Zach LaVine for some reason in a league that just needs shooting. What are the Bulls going to do as we approach the deadline?
Vucevic too. I mean, Vuce is having a career season shooting the lights out. I feel like they could find a trade partner for this team and what LaVine and Vooch can do. But even outside of that, they have talent. Like Kobe White dunked on Wemby tonight, which could have been
that's a poster,
9 blocks. That is a poster. Absolutely. When it comes to Wemby, I don't know what this Bulls team will do, though, because they're in a position where they need to get their first round pick. If they don't end up with like bottom 6 odds, it's likely gone. So this is where it comes down to tanking and being good enough and whatnot. And I know you hate that conversation.
I hate tanking so much.
They should be good. You know?
Yeah. Hey, look, it's the Chicago Bulls. I think they have a tradition that they need to uphold.
Fair.
Go ahead and stay in the play-in, guys. Just one more year. Let's just do it. Guys, stick around after the break. We got Sam Cooper talk about the Suns and their bad vibes. Well, we've been hearing that the Phoenix Suns vibes are kind of in the gutter, and they got a win over the Sixers last night without Joel Embiid. So we reached out to our guy, Sam Cooper, the host of the Timeline Pod, a podcast about the Phoenix Suns, to just give us a little bit of a vibe check. Sam, how's it going? They get a big win. Does this mean the vibes are fixed?
First of all, Dave, appreciate you guys having me on. This was the most fun I've had watching a Suns game in probably 3 or 4 weeks.
Wow.
I wouldn't even say it was a perfect game by any means. It was a fairly horrendous first half, but yeah, they were smiling. They were having fun. The rookies got in and gave some good production. Bradley Beal goes to the bench and drops, I think, 25 points in his first game off the bench. So people are making jokes that he's Manu Ginobili now. I would say,
well, let's pump the brakes, but I do appreciate the sentiment.
Yeah,
there's Joel. So Joel didn't play. It's a shorthanded Sixers team. Yeah. Your question, is everything fixed? Obviously, everything's not fixed.
Yeah.
I do think there is a certain level of professionalism that these guys, this particular locker room maybe has approached this game with, and they did feel connected. Something I want to say to Bradley Beal's credit is there are a lot of athletes who kind of in these types of situations, especially his situation, could easily pout.
Yeah.
And he did not look like that. If you want to be a body language doctor or body language expert from tonight, he looks like a guy who wants to go out there and play and win games. There are all sorts of issues with the team this season, and one game is not going to solve that. And potentially, even as we talk about it, one trade alone is not going to solve that. But it was good just to see them smile a bit for once.
Why do you think? I mean, we can probably talk about the recent struggles, right? The defense has fallen off a cliff, but why do you think this particular lineup change was necessary, or do you think it was necessary at all for them to make this lineup change?
Yes, it was a great question, but it was absolutely necessary. It's maybe a little bit counterintuitive for people some people. I mean, I think a lot of people have been saying for a long time these three stars don't fit together.
Yeah,
but what helped that it happened now is you have the whole Bradley Beal trade rumors looming. And of course, we all know that he has the no trade clause and maybe, that is a way to sort of push him to be willing to waive that. So that's there. And you have to consider that. But there's also a statistical objective argument for as a basketball team, why this was a good move for them.
Yeah.
Just throw a couple lineup stats at you guys. When Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant share the floor this season, I think they have a net rating of -7 when all three of them are together. When just Booker and Durant are on the floor and Beal is off, that flips to a +6. And so, which doesn't make them an elite contender or anything, but the difference between a +6 and a -7, there's been this consistent thread throughout the season of kind of every lineup Bradley Beal has been a part of. He's sort of tanked the net rating a little bit with a couple of particular exceptions. And so, it was something that had to happen. Again, I don't think that one move by itself fixes this team, but we'll see. Maybe, they have a weaker schedule coming up here over the next couple of weeks, and maybe they can generate some positive momentum before the trade deadline even comes.
Yeah, I mean, look, nothing wrong with having Bradley Beal being a good citizen, you know what I mean, and a good teammate, especially if he is being involved in trade rumors. Other teams are going to be more likely to take a guy who doesn't seem like he's got a chip on his shoulder when it comes to, coming off the bench or something like that. I got to ask you about Devin Booker. He had a great summer with Team USA. We had high expectations for him. I mean, especially on this show. I mean, we were talking like this guy is going to be all NBA. He's the perfect piece to make Beal and Kevin Durant fit. And I think that's still true, but not this Devin Booker. What is wrong with Devin Booker? I mean, he had another rough game shooting the ball. I mean, just doesn't really have the burst and athleticism that you're used to seeing from this guy. I mean, is it just dead legs? Is it the groin injury? Is it a combination? You watch him every single day. What's wrong with him?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Dave. And I think it's something, the sort of greater existential thing that we're going to have to touch on our pod. We haven't really touched on like with more depth, and we're probably going to have to cover it pretty soon. With Book, it's year 11. And this is something we don't really think about with him. We don't think about him having this extent of mileage on his body at this point. But yeah, he's got a recent groin injury. He did play in the Olympics this summer, so maybe there's some residual effects there. But personally, I think, you combine, thankfully, knock on wood, he hasn't had a major injury in his career to the extent of he hasn't torn an ACL, he hasn't torn an Achilles, but he has had multiple hamstring strains, calf strain here, a groin injury there. And I do think over time it starts to add up to a point where, as exceptional as he's been delivering passes this season, and he really has become such a smart playmaker over the course of his career, he does seem to be lacking a little bit in that burst. And I think we're still hoping that it's just kind of a slump that he can get himself out of. But even a little bit of like the lift on kind of those 15, 16 foot elbow jumpers, which for Devin Booker's entire career has been his bread and butter.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to be there to the same level.
Sam, you had a good stat. I don't have it in front of me, but his rate getting his shot blocked has essentially risen by about he's up, is 150%?
Well, it was 60%, but yeah,
60%,
like
excuse me.
He got, I forget exactly what it was, but he got blocked like 40 times last season, and he's on pace for like 70 times this year. And, it might not seem like a lot, like when you're looking at it, just a game or 5 games at a time, but over a season it adds up, and we really are seeing, his worst finishing season, possibly in his career. I have to double check the stats, but at the very least in 6 or 7 years. So it is a bit of a greater long-term concern.
Would you put any of that on having Yusuf Nurkic kind of in the paint, working the dunker? It's similar to what Anthony Edwards is dealing with in Minnesota, man. One of these days, these teams are going to figure out that, fit around your stars just matters so much. So
they're asking him to be Kevin Durant. You remember the quote,
That's
they're
right.
asking him to be Kevin Durant.
That kind of explains a little bit getting Mason Plumlee in there. I think, a guy that you can have operate at the elbow a little bit more often than you can with Nurk. I mean, do you think that that's going to solve the problem? And if it does solve the offensive issues, how do they defend with that lineup?
Well, are you talking about with the Plumlee lineup or
with the Plumlee?
It's no secret. So like you guys are wondering about what are the issues with this team? Like, it's no one thing. There's the Bradley Beal piece. There's the Devin Booker piece. There's the lack of wing size piece, which is another thing that we haven't even hit on, right? But it's like, they either have guys who are good defenders or, who are good defenders, but are like 6'4", like Josh Okogie, and can't shoot. And they don't kind of have the right blend of 3 and D perimeter guys. And then another big one is they have arguably the worst center rotation in the entire NBA. And I think it's telling, arguably, it might be bottom 5, bottom 6, but I think it's telling that they close a game like tonight's against Philly with a rookie, Oso Ighodaro, who's drafted 40th overall.
He's been
awesome,
their
entire center. I've been really impressed with his effort, and the way he also can play at the elbow and kind of be that connecting piece offensively. He's also a 6'10", 230-pound rookie who's going to get.
That's not a good story for a team that's got a $408 million payroll. I'm sorry. Like this is
that's true.
This is not like the sort of thing that the Phoenix Suns should be discovering in the first week of January, Sam. I think I'm picking up on what you're putting down here, is that as nice as it is that they've got this rookie and Ryan Dunn, hey, he's really a player. That's not what this team was put together to do.
Yeah, their stars in some ways have let them down. I would say the exception to that is Kevin Durant, who I think will be their only all-star this year. I don't think Devin Booker has a chance, unfortunately, with the way he's playing. But then a lot of their role players have also let them down. Yusuf Nurkic has been one of the worst centers in the NBA. Mason Plumlee, honestly, is only a veteran minimum contract. So, I don't really blame him for it, but is showing signs of age. I think he's 34 years old and just looks so much older than kind of the Mason Plumlee I knew from a few years ago, who could still get up and catch some lobs. Right now he catches a ball in the short roll and he's just afraid to look at the rim. So it's a completely different player, and they have issues all over the map with their rotation, to the point where it's like, you talk about how to solve them. Like, I don't think a Jimmy Butler trade solves this. I think they're 3 or 4 trades away from being the contender that they think they are.
I'm glad you asked because I mean, like,
I figured we had to cover it. So.
Yeah, look, there are not a lot of avenues for this team to get better, right? They have that pick very, very far away from now. I believe it's 2031 that they have a pick that they can give out. Salary wise, Bradley Beal's no trade clause is really holding down their flexibility to be able to make some moves. Yes, there's the Jimmy Butler trade. Yes, there's what they can do to grab Jimmy. But is there anything else outside of that, do you think, that they could try to do to improve this roster heading into the trade deadline?
I mean, if they were willing to trade one of their rookies, I absolutely do not want them to. Let me be clear from a fan's perspective, but like from the Matt Ishbia perspective of how do we dig this even deeper and go all in? I guess theoretically that's how you could scrounge up an asset. Otherwise, I think honestly, Nurkic has been so bad that I think any sort of addition by subtraction is at play. We've talked about all sorts of centers. If they could just get a Jonas Valanciunas, a Nick Richards, someone who makes $15 million or less and is not good.
This is wild.
But is not
this is wild to
not
hear.
horrible.
Yeah.
Not horrible. That would honestly help them a lot. Again, I don't think it makes them competitive in, say, a first round series against the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I do think it would make them substantially better in the second half of the season. And maybe if they could claw their way all the way back to like the 5th or 6th seed, they could talk themselves into having a chance against whoever they'd play in the first round. But if they're just going to be an 8th seed, like, they have quite the ladder to climb at this point, and it's going to take more than just a minor move to get there.
Remind me again before we get out of here. When is their next first round draft pick that they own?
What? Okay, not next year. That they own is 2031.
Yeah, 2031.
Yeah.
They have a pick in 20. They have a pick in 2026, which is swapped like 3 times, and they get the worst of it or whatever. And their next one that they own is 2031.
Yeah, which they will probably trade.
Good luck. I assume that they would if they could. Sam Cooper, thanks for joining us. Guys, go and check out the Timeline podcast. I feel like this is going to be must listen for the next few weeks leading up to the deadline. We'll do the vibe check maybe in a month or so after the deadline, see how things go. Stick around. S and I will be back after a short break. In case you missed this marquee matchup last night, the Pistons picked up their 18th win of the season with a 22-point comeback against the Trailblazers. They moved to 18-18 on the season.
That's right.
And this is the latest that they have been above 500 since the last day of the 2018-2019 season. So the latest in the season that they have been above 500 or at 500 or above since the final day of 2018-2019. That's pretty incredible when you think about how sad it is.
Yeah.
That it's this long.
I'll give you some other stuff here, just some fun facts about that 2018-2019 season to make you think how long ago that really was. Make us feel old, right, Dave? Let's just do it. Paul George.
That feels like a million years ago, to be honest.
Anyway. I mean, look, Paul George was on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Luka Doncic was in his rookie year. Blake Griffin was an all-NBA player. Victor Oladipo was an all-star. Kyrie Irving was on the Boston Celtics, and Kevin Durant was on the Golden State Warriors. So life has changed a lot since the Detroit Pistons have been 500 or better. So
that's pretty incredible. What's been the secret to their success? I mean, this team, look, they've got some veterans, and that was something that we expected. This is going to raise their floor a bit. They upgraded at coach because they actually got a coach that wants to be there, and it seems like these guys are playing hard for him. But is it all Cade, basically?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because we were talking about Anthony Edwards in the A block of how the context around him doesn't really work. I think you could look at what Cade Cunningham is doing this season and looking at how the context works incredibly well with what he does. He had 32 points tonight, was efficient. He's been doing stuff like that all season. His turnovers are down over the last 15 games. He's shooting the lights out from behind the arc. I think he's hitting 38% of his threes so far this season, which is a massive improvement for him as this pull-up shot creator type of guy. Cade is looking like a shoo-in to be an all-star in the Eastern Conference. And to take it a step further, I actually think he might end up being an all-NBA player, which is a huge step to make from what he was last year as a guy who we weren't even sure was a guy who could lead a team to the playoffs, and now is looking like a guy who, like the Pistons, are well within playoff range. So kudos to Cade. I think that goes to show you how important context matters to what these younger guys, because you add the Malik Beasleys, you add the, Tobias Harris's of the world, shot creation and scoring next to him. It makes his life a lot easier. And now he's balling out because of it.
All right, I got to ask you, because you were hot on the Pistons when we came into the year. As we sit right now, they're a half game back of the Miami Heat for that 6th seed, and we know the Heat are on their way down. So, I mean, I'm going to make you make a prediction. Do they make top 6, or is this going to be a play-in team?
Man, top 6 is tough. I'm going to say no.
Because they're fighting with the Pacers too.
Yeah. I'm going to say no to top 6. Indiana's been playing some really good basketball, so I'm going to say no to top 6. But top 8, Dave, I'm buying. Yes, I think they end up being a top 8 team. I'm doing it. Let's do it.
Petition the league to go back to the old format for the playoffs so the Pistons can make it. That's going to do it for today's show, folks. Thank you guys for listening. For Es Baraheni and Sam Cooper, thanks for stopping by. I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.